Hi, everyone, and thank you, Megan and Kaylee and Bo, for the invite. I know that we got to work together in the Learning Institute, and we're thinking through a lot of those concepts. I'm in the space of criminology, law, and society. It's good to see some familiar faces, Hillary and such. So, as we know and can attest to, oh, she's waving to everyone. Awesome. As we know and can attest to, in the space of criminology, law, and society, as I know for a lot of you in your departments, we deal with heavy topics. We deal with quite a few controversial, divisive topics. And so it's very important for me and for I know our colleagues to be thinking about how we build a space that is really collaborative, meaning making, and where students get an opportunity to share their different perspectives and the worlds that they come from. So actually something that Hillary and I talk a lot about is thinking about what is the most meaningful way to do that in a virtual space. And I know there's a number of different tools and ways to think about it, but just a little of what I wanted to share today was thinking through the template that you'll all get an opportunity to be working through and looking at, and how I've used that template to be able to incorporate some of this democratic meaning making. And so, for example, this was the summer session 1 course that I did. I'm now doing a different one for summer session 2 and gearing up with all of you in fall, so we can definitely share our sentiments about that. But what's really great, and I know that I was a little hesitant at first and even thinking through the template because I was like, oh, I have a format and I already do modules, so why do I necessarily need to rethink it? But you'll find that you can actually keep your same approach, whether you divide it by lectures or whether you divide it by modules or week to week, and you can really just evolve it for that. So as you can see, this one is just built as 5 modules, and I know they've updated the template so that you can have 10 modules for the fall portion of it. But what's really great is the way that you can intuitively lead through it so that students aren't feeling like they're needing to go to different parts of the Canvas page. And so, for example, it has this inbuilt navigation bar where you can start and work through, but anytime you click one of these, tech gods willing, right, it will take us to that module that they're thinking through for that week. And then that way, every other component, as you can see along this left-hand bar here, is essentially just hidden. Please at any time someone just like raise their hand or yell at me if I'm scrolling too fast, because I know that it can be a little nausea inducing. And so then, for example, as like you're in each module, it's really great because there's built-in resources there for you, and you can think the different ways in terms of whether you use quizzes or surveys or group work or lesson materials to lead your students through it in a super intuitive way. And I'll just give one quick example. The way I split it is between in-class materials and out-of-class materials, because I found that students still like to have this intuitive approach of whether you're meeting synchronously or asynchronously. This one was designed primarily asynchronously, although we built in synchronous components as well. They still think of it or conceive of it in the way of what am I used to in terms of attending class and then doing outside of class. And so for each of our in-class materials section, we have like our built-in lesson materials and then our group work that corresponds to that, some warm-up and wrap-up surveys. And then they know after they complete that based off of their roadmap, what they're doing in terms of putting it all together for an end-of-week reflection, as well as preparing for next week. Another component that I found, as I'm sure many of you have found as well, is that there's just that disconnect, or they don't feel necessarily the sequencing between different weeks because of the way that time just kind of melds together, as I know we all feel right now. What day of the week is it, right? So this is a good way for them to be thinking about really what week and what section they're in and keeping the continuity between modules. And so, for example, what I do in lesson materials, and it varies a bit, but is I've just created mini lessons that each mini lesson that will correspond to a topic then also has one activity group work component that they work through immediately after they've thought through that lesson or that activity. Again, I build this out in an asynchronous way, so they have opportunities to contribute to the group work at different times, but it could also be done in a synchronous or live fashion. And so, for example, they'll have their mini lessons. You can see this week had 4. But then what's really great is because I was always doing group work with them, but I think students were having a hard time navigating between the group work or coming back to the lessons. And so now the way it's integrated in this module that DTI has set up for you is just, they know every time they finish a mini lesson, they can navigate to the next page. And I have it all built through the Google Drive function. So of course there's different ways to do that. And I know some like to use collaborations, but I link it through Google Drive because I've just found that students, many use Google Docs, many haven't even used Microsoft Word. And so they're very comfortable with just the Google functionality. And then once they're in here, it links them to however many groups you want to do. And I've done it with courses of 50 students all the way up to 250. And it's just about dividing out more groups. And then built into here is each of the activities. And so, for example, because they were just taking a long time to load, but each group can link to their individual one, and then their activities will be built here for them. And they're instructed in different ways to, of course, contribute their own opinions, but then they also comment on each other. So they use the comment functionality in the Google Doc space to be able to do that. And as you can see, it has really become a space, and we exhort them for it to be a space where they're doing both community building and then also thinking substantively about the topics that they're working through. And so they're always told to find some way to connect, whether that's via email or some other platform. And then you can, of course, jump in, or TAs or learning assistants, to be part of the conversation. And as I noted, they'll do their topics that are like very substantively driven. But I've also found, and what I enjoy is that they'll also just share about themselves. They'll connect with each other. And one big aspect, for example, since as I know, we're always about building in individual perspectives, and we use podcasts and videos and all different perspectives. And one thing that I really stress is you should be integrating all these voices. You should be integrating our text, but you should also feel comfortable integrating the voices and the refined perspectives from your colleagues that complement your arguments, so that they don't feel stressed to always reinvent the wheel. And so one activity that we do fairly early on across my courses is thinking about their identity and different aspects of it and sharing it and why that would impact the course material. And so, of course, you can think about how that varies with different classes and different topics. But for hate crimes, it's definitely a space where they've been thinking a lot about anti-Black racism, increased hate-motivated violence towards Asian American and Pacific Islander communities because of COVID-19. And so as you can see, they do some like very interpersonal comments, and we'll prompt them to do it, where they'll just be like, yes, girl, we love it. And they'll be very friendly and get to know each other. And then they'll also, do their substantive comments and think about cultural norms and think about different identities and how they want to build that in and use that in coursework. And so this really just creates a running document for them, and we link it separately each week that they can just return to throughout the course, so that then when they're doing later assignments and assessments, which again is built out in the modules, but I'm already at well over my 5 minutes, so I won't take up too much more time, but they'll get the opportunity to then, like when they do an end of the week reflection or they do a written assessment, we exhort them to go revisit their group docs and again, build in all of these secondary sources that we're working through, but also think creatively about each other's opinions and why that matters for the material as well. So that's a little bit of what we think for an inclusive education model. But happy to talk more about it and work through any other different topic that people are thinking about and answer questions. So thank you. I'll be around for most of the session.